Good morning, everybody, and welcome to the show that currently doesn't have a title, where I take the opportunity to spend some time talking to some of the wonderful people that work at Standing Stone Games, specifically on the game The Lord of the Rings Online, and get the opportunity to ask some questions about some of the new and upcoming content that happens to be coming out for the game. So joining me today are actually 6 members from Standing Stone Games. I have Bakata, a content designer. Cordovan, you'd obviously know him as the community manager for Lord of the Rings Online and Dungeons & Dragons Online. Lansu EV, another content designer. Nobob, a senior content designer. The Pinion, another content designer. And finally, Scenario_SSG, senior world designer. And so they're going to be here with me today, kind of going through and answering some questions that I took from a bunch of people, and also came up with myself some things about the new expansion, The War of Three Peaks. Now, if you're unfamiliar and you don't know anything about it, and at the end of this interview you're like, man, you know what? Maybe I want to try getting some of that. You'll be able to find an easy link in the description of this video to find out exactly how you can purchase it and what's the easiest way to go about that. So thank you guys for joining me. How y'all doing today?
Doing great. This is Cordovan, Jerry Snook, the community manager for LOTRO.
Doing pretty good. This is Bob, or No Bob on the forums. It's thanks for having us on.
Yeah, happy to be here. Thanks for having us.
Yeah, thanks so much for taking the time to talk with us today. This is Bakata.
This is Lansu. Good to be here.
And this is Scenario. Thanks for wrangling us.
All right, so there's a lot of things that are going on in this expansion, and it's building on a bunch of stuff that has been going. So before we get started, there's going to be some people out there that really don't even know what War of Three Peaks even means. Maybe they're familiar with the Lord of the Rings, maybe they haven't played, or it's been a couple years. Can someone give me like a quick 4-on-1 on what's going on with the expansion, why we're here, what it's about?
This sort of follows the storyline we've been building on since going to Aaron Lasgalin, Dale, and Erebor. So basically, we've been having more interactions with the Dwarves of the North. This sort of follows the Legacy of Durin and the Trials of the Dwarves. That is our storyline that's been going since Arid Mithrin. And basically, this is the events of War of Three Peaks basically focus on Prince Durin of Erebor and the efforts of him, the Longbeards, and a bunch of other dwarf clans to reclaim Gundabad.
Gundabad being a place which has been overtaken by orcs following the events to this point.
Dwarves versus orcs. This sounds like classic Lord of the Rings.
Indeed, it is classic Lord of the Rings. Yeah, and the 3 peaks in the title refers to the 3 mountain peaks above the dwarf hold of Gundabad.
So you mentioned that it was a bunch of the dwarves coming together. What are some of is there a major faction in this expansion that we're going to be dealing with specifically?
Yeah, there's basically 3 main factions of dwarves that have come together to rally under the banner of Durin, and that would be the Gelruka, the Stout Axes, and the Longbeards. The Gelruka we first introduced in, I think it was Erebor, and Stout Axes we actually introduced in Mordor.
Right, as a new player race option.
Yep.
So we have these factions of dwarves coming together. Now, there's obviously a couple big people that are featured in specifically the Longbeards, how we work together. Are there any big returning characters or recurring characters that some people might know from their journeys?
Yeah, we actually took a lot of characters that players will have remembered from various past updates in the game, all the way back to at least Moria, if not earlier. I know there's members of the Iron Garrison.
Bosi, not Broger for spoiler reasons, but we actually have a couple from Hrimbarg in Misty Mountains as well. There are some really, really old characters from the Misty Mountains in the original release of the game that have come along as well.
Mother Amma is there. Nay and the Slakeless.
Glowin.
Yep, Glowin.
Yeah, Gimli's dad is the commander of the Longbeard army.
And he plays a pretty big role.
Oh, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I was going to say we also do have a mostly new character, right? Gorgar, but related to a long-time foe.
Yes, Gorgar the Ruthless is the brother of Mazog from the Moria content. the son of Bolg.
who himself was the son of Azog, legendary orc that was slain outside Azanulbazar.
Well, obviously the dwarves haven't been in the Elderslade for a long time. What can, like, the players and also, just the advancing army in general, what types of fauna and enemies can you expect to find in the Elderslade?
It's a very rocky, mountainous terrain. It's high altitude. You're getting close to the actual peaks of the Grey Mountains. Basically, what's there is like a lot of scrub, large boulders that have fallen off cliffs, and a lot of really dilapidated old dwarf ruins.
In terms of enemies, we have a bunch of sort of returning foes in addition to Gorgar and his orcs that inhabit Gundabad. For example, there are Angmarim, hillmen, and hill beasts, and actually some Dourhands, believe it or not.
Yeah, they didn't just fall into a hole or anything.
Yeah, the fall of Angmar and the fall of the False King didn't wipe everybody off the map, and they still have plans of their own.
What kind of quests can we expect to see in here? Are there group content style quests in this area for the landscape for people to work together on, or kind of larger quests?
There's actually a lot of stuff happening quest wise in this update. We have like a lot of quest chains with their individual plot threads that you can pick up at various points, and they'll take you on like an adventure of their own. We also bring the players to the war front later in the update, where you'll be actually in the War of Three Peaks and helping the army secure the front. In that area, there will be some 3-player landscape group content.
As you move across the battlefield right before the end, things become a bit tougher to overcome.
I think we took the feedback that we had received from Mordor Besieged and the concept that was a area under siege, and didn't quite feel that way. I think we took that feedback really well to heart and made the War of Three Peaks version of Elderslade something that felt distinct and different and war-torn, so that as you're exploring Elderslade and then exploring the War of Three Peaks, you can really feel the difference in the landscape and in the conflict that's going on there.
The update actually has a lot of repeatable content this time around, and a lot of that is actually our new mission system.
One of the ideas that we really wanted to do is kind of provide a sort of a wealth of different types of activities and repeatable activities over the course of the expansion. The new mission system is something that we're pretty excited about, mostly because it allows us to make sort of level agnostic quests, which are accessible by anywhere from level 20 all the way up to cap, and are available in both solo and duo. And it allows players which are perhaps not at cap level to actually see important story points over the course of the expansion, and also kind of get a little more of the storytelling as a portion of the expansion. One of the things when we were looking at past expansions, one of the things that we felt we could do a little bit better is essentially engaging lower level players and figuring ways for them to participate in the story of ongoing expansions.
Well, the thing about that I thought was the most interesting kind of about some of the things in the missions is, as you said, is it can be played by anybody who's level 20 all the way up to level 130. We already do have a kind of similar system to that in the form of skirmishes. How exactly are the missions separate from something like skirmishes?
So skirmishes and missions definitely have some like behind the hood, some similar technology. What makes missions so much more accessible is the way you don't have to worry about figuring out what level, because it just scales to your level. You'll never be under level when you do a mission. You'll just be at your level, and you don't have to like set perimeters or anything. With skirmishes, it's usually attack or defense. With missions, it's oftentimes like a multi-objective or a very short bite-size objective. It can change a lot depending on the mission. We have some missions that are just, a small one room and you have to kill a boss, and other missions where you have to do like 5 things in order for it to complete. So it just varies a lot more than a skirmish does.
They also tend to be more bite-sized chunks of content, and it allows us to sort of quickly revisit areas in the game and sort of pull them forward into the current storyline. Like some of the older areas that are in missions in this update have changed since you might have last seen them, so it sort of allows us to revisit like very specific locations and sort of bring them up to the exact current moment of the story.
Yeah, I was actually going to mention that. That's one of the things that I think is particularly neat about them, is it gives you, in this case, more than 80 different sort of missions to run. Just you'll be getting some rewards and all that too, but you'll also be expanding, quickly getting throughout the entire game world and seeing what's going on in this area. And of course, the idea behind what we're doing with missions is something that we could perhaps explore further in the future in a way that I imagine most of us here probably find pretty exciting.
Absolutely. Also, we should mention that missions have a sort of twist system in which basically each mission and its monsters have like a certain power or buff or skill that sort of can make them different between playthroughs of each mission. And twists basically allow us to add something special to otherwise like fairly simple monsters that are in these spaces, just to have a little more action on the player's side.
I would also like to point out the narrative missions is what we've been calling them. Every time you rank up with the Gabilaka, you will unlock from Commander Glowin a new narrative mission. And it's like a regular mission, but with a more complex story. It's a little bit longer. There will be a named character helping you most of the time. And I really enjoyed making those, and I hope people love them.
Now, you mentioned that missions have the possibility, if they're successful and if people like them, to be expanded, which is super cool. But one of the expansions I was wondering if you had thought about, or if this is maybe something for a different system, is this content is obviously designed for solo play. There are players out there who like to play the game, but maybe find it difficult to interact with other players and want some of that either more challenging or group content level experience, but maybe just for themselves. Is there either a thought to potentially making missions in the future that lead to more challenging encounters that maybe aren't necessary or required, but for those that want it?
Oh yeah, definitely. I mean, that's like, there's so many things we can do with missions, and making challenge missions is certainly like something within the scope of our ability for the future.
If people like that idea, we can definitely come up with some extremely challenging twists to really give people a run for their money.
Yeah, I think actually with the twist system that we made, we kept the twists on the light side of difficulty, just so it didn't detract, casual players from interacting with it.
Correct.
But,
I did intentionally make some of these twists. Like, I'm trying to get some of our more casual players more interested in these kinds of mechanic interactions, that they maybe, if they only do landscape, they have never really had to think about interrupting a spell induction or cleansing a corruption off a monster. And I want them to start thinking about these things, and maybe the next step for them is to then try doing some tier 1 3-mans and really get more involved in what the game has to offer.
And I think for missions, if we do challenge missions, it would probably still sort of follow our scheme with more modern 3-man and 6-mans, where we'd probably have a soloable version. We've sort of moved away from like the old style solo quest after solo quest, ending it like the 6-man Tomb of Elendil quest line. So I'm sure there would be another way to engage with it, but I think it would be really neat to have challenge missions.
like we were saying, basically missions in a lot of ways for us are stepping stones for players to be interested in some of the more challenging content in our game. We're sort of hoping that players go from missions to skirmishes to instances.
Specifically, are there actual like gameplay factions that we get to earn reputation with?
Yeah, there are 2 in the War of Three Peaks. There's the March on Gundabad, which is more the level cap centric faction, which is just the advance of Durin and the dwarves of the Gabalaka, which is like the unified dwarf army on Gundabad. And there's also the Gabalaka faction specifically, which is the mission faction, which is available from players level 20 to cap. That's more of a separate faction that's specifically for the mission system in this update.
So if somebody takes the time and earns a reputation, what kind of rewards then can they expect to get out of each faction?
The March on Gundabad faction has pretty standard endgame rewards. We have gear, I think craftables, whereas the Gabalaka faction is more of a cosmetic and like moat-based system, so that players can get moats and barter for gear as they're leveling up, sort of making missions like a sort of skirmish equivalent leveling process that we have an actual faction tied to. And yeah, it's mostly non-level specific gear, but obviously if you earn moats, you can use that to equip yourself.
Well, speaking of endgame and raids and things like that, I know that this expansion does come with a 6-man encounter and a raid encounter. So I wanted to know how do these raid and 6-man, how do they interact with the story so far with the dwarves and their assault?
The raid and 6-man both take place sort of at the end of the story, in the proper War of Three Peaks. After the events of the mission system and the Elderslade landscape, you then go into the War of Three Peaks region, and the raid is sort of meant to be a capstone moment to that story. And the same story beat is in the Legacy of Durin quest line, because we didn't want to exclude any players who aren't interested in raiding from knowing like what happens at the steps of Gundabad. But it is meant to be like this big, epic, final battle moment of the War of Three Peaks that will eventually lead into the continuing story.
So with the new raid and 6-man, I believe I heard somewhere that there's going to be a slightly different method to the tiering system done with this expansion. Do you think you could elaborate a little bit on that?
For a while now, we have been aware that there is a wide gulf between our very high-end players and our more casual landscape-focused players. And it's part because our characters are very complex. There is a lot of different choices you can make in their gearing and their LI and their talents. And there's not currently a lot of community theory crafting available for newer players who are looking to get into that side of the game. Like, how do I even get there? So in order to facilitate these players getting more involved in raiding, we have been taking steps to make the lowest tiers of raiding more accessible. So this time, Tier 1 is extremely easy. We've been calling it a story mode. It's very mechanics light, and you should just be able to go in there with 12 people who are paying attention, a tank and a couple healers, and see the events unfold, get some loot, have a good time. From there, the new Tier 2 is equivalent to what the old Tier 1 of, like, say, Remerkant was like. The new Tier 3 is like the new Tier 2, etc. The mechanics will stop at Tier 4, which with the new Tier 4 being like the previous Tier 3. That is as mechanically complex as it will get. And then the new Tier 5 we are calling Challenge Mode, which will introduce a new, something like a twist on the entire raid space. We'll have to see what that will be for this upcoming Tier 5.
All the players are really, really tiny.
One of the things that we're trying to do is also in the lower tiers of the specific 6-man. We kind of looked at the first tier of it in a similar way. It's more of a specific story mode, and on top of that, in this particular 6-man, we also have a solo version, which is an even more like. If you want that group experience, but have a group of players which have a certain level of experience or comfort with their classes and their abilities, we wanted to have a group version, which is a lot more, bare bones and basic, so that they get an idea of what the story is, and at least a little bit of hint of the flavor and some of the mechanics that they might see in higher tiers. But we also offer a solo version of it, so that people can see the entire experience from start to finish.
So this tier 1 experience, making it kind of very introductory for players, this is something that, carries through not just like the raid content, but the 6-man and possibly other future content going forward?
I think that that's going to be our hope. Essentially, we want to provide a onboarding experience for players which may have been shy or may have been a little hesitant to attempt to do some of the group-focused content, especially our newer dungeons and newer raids, and bring that kind of audience, at least get their toes dipped into it, just so that they can get use of it and kind of get a chance to also get a lot of the experience of the storytelling. One of the challenges that we may have had in the past is that sometimes players may have felt left out, as a portion of our storytelling was either done through raids or done through group instances, which were a little less accessible. And as a team, it's one of the things that we're trying to kind of go back and look at as something that we want to shift up and make sure that those players, pretty much anyone, can experience the storytelling in those spaces.
I know for a fact that happens to be something a lot of people struggle with, is understanding how to build their characters and what to do, and some of it can seem kind of nebulous and difficult. However, if you are watching this video right now and you are unsure and maybe you need some additional help or something, I will provide some links in the description of this video that will then give you additional information about potentially each class that you might play. There are some good links out there. They're kind of hard to find, but I've collected it already, so you'll be able to see and hopefully get some good information about your class if you want to take that next step and up your gameplay. All right, well, now we've gotten the War of Three Peaks out of the way, there are a few burning things that I've definitely discussed with some other players that we're curious about, and maybe you guys might be able to shed some insight on. The previous expansion happened in Minas Morgul, which is right near Mordor, and now we're heading up with the War of Three Peaks with the dwarves. Is this something where we're going to expect the two storylines to advance in tandem, or is there more of a focus towards one direction currently with where the story is going?
I think in the future you can expect the continuing saga of Gondor and the continuing saga of the dwarves in the north to both kind of be expanded in tandem. One will happen and then the other. So.
The other thing that I wanted to ask about is that I know that there's been rumors here and there, and it has been mentioned at different points, something about a Brawler Class. Is that something we can talk about here?
I can mention a little bit. We don't have anything we can announce about any future class that we might have coming out. The players did see some work in progress that ended up on a preview server, but at this point we haven't formally announced a class. Informally, it's pretty clear that we've got some work that's being done. It's in the early stages, and we'll be getting you more information about that in the near future.
All right, well, I'm excited. Anytime there's any new abilities or way to interact with the game is always something new, and I'm definitely looking forward to it.
I guess I could just say that if you wanted to learn more about War of Three Peaks, the way to do that is go to LOTRO.com. You'll see a market link at the top of the page, and you'll follow through to the new LOTRO market. Another thing you can do is go to the following URL, that is lotro.com/war, lotro.com/war, as in war, what is it good for? And then you will find out that you can get 3 packages and learn a lot more about how to get it and all that, and apply it to your game account. And if you don't have a game account, you can just go to lotro.com and download the game for free. You don't need a credit card to sign up and play for free. And we'd love to see you check it out.
So thank you so much to the wonderful members of SSG who joined me today. I really appreciate you guys coming in and kind of sharing your knowledge with me, and hopefully helping some people who haven't had the chance to know about this expansion or maybe haven't played LOTRO in a while to get back into it.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you very much for taking the time,
Thank
sir.
you.
It's always great.
It is always a pleasure.
So as always, thank you for watching. Buy the expansion, and I will see everyone in the next series that doesn't have a title yet, that will get a title soon.